Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to yet another edition of the Pure Digital Passion Podcast with me, Moses Kemibaro. Today's conversation is with John Kageche. John is somebody I've known, I believe, for almost 30 years. Him and I go way back to my time in Mombasa when I was first starting out my career. And as it turns out, by the way, we're actually neighbors where our offices are currently located, which is completely coincidental, never planned it. But John and I bumped into each other a few weeks ago and we had this conversation that was really amazing. And I told John, listen, why don't we do a podcast? And then the other day he reminds me and said, Moses, are we still doing the podcast? And then, finally here we are. And we get a chance to talk to John, who, in my opinion, is probably one of the most prolific sales professionals in the country. Somebody who does this with a great passion. He also has had in the past a column in one of the publications. And generally, I think what I love about his backstory is that the way that he's been able to sort of build and cultivate his expertise into an exciting profession, but also the way that he's able to segue into a digital platform where he's been sharing a thought leadership, which will take us through. So thank you so much for joining us, John.
Thank you very much, Moses, for having me.
So, John, I want us to really go back to origin, your origin story. Who's John? I met you when you were probably in your early 20s, somewhere
That's
in
true.
Mombasa.
Goodness, we are old men now.
And I believe we first encountered each other because we were at some point in the same Rotaract club.
Absolutely.
But let's go to origins. I want to know how you grew up, and, sort of building up to where we are today. So let's just go to the early days. Who's John?
Well, back at the days, grew up in Mombasa, born, raised in Mombasa, and worked in Mombasa, actually, before I came to Nairobi about, 25 years ago. And throughout that period in Mombasa, by the time we were coming to meet, I remember was starting off your digital with that time, goodness, how things...
Africa Online.
Africa Online, I remember.
Yes.
And those days, email was a big thing.
Yes.
We take it for granted now, but having an email address...
huge,
it sounds so absurd now. But yes, it was a big thing. And as you were starting off there, we met, bunch of us in Rotaract together. We met and I was in life insurance. I was selling life insurance at that time. So I sold that quite successfully, I must say, for about 3.5, 4 years. Then moved on to selling travel services and got to appreciate the difference between B2B, B2C and B2B selling.
Okay.
And have sold financial services and everything else. But across that period, then I discovered my true passion in terms of empowerment and helping individuals become better at what they do, and especially salespeople. So around about that time is when started off, got a column with the leading premier newspaper, Business Daily in East Africa. And I ran a column called Sales Pitch, incidentally, for about 8 years.
8 years, wow.
8 years. I ran that column for 8 years. It used to appear on Thursdays for 8 years. And in addition to that, in terms of building empowerment, I read a book called Lend Me Your Ears, and I figured one day I'll have a company called Lend Me Your Ears. And its primary focus at that time was, again, empowerment for salespeople. Of course, now it's grown to something else. But yes, sales has and continues to be the core of what I'm known for and what Lend Me Your Ears is known for.
So let's go back a little bit again, because I met you, I think, like you're saying at the time that I think you're working for one of the insurers, you're selling life insurance.
Yes.
And even then, I think what was very evident to me, there was this passion, this passion for sales or selling. Where does that come from? Is it something that maybe one of your parents or one of your peers? Is there like some sort of backstory to that as well? The fact that, you've made it the bedstone of your, your career, this element of sales or selling. Yeah.
Interesting question. I've not thought about it like that. But now that I'm thinking about it, no, there's no background to it. I think the passion came, and reflecting now on it, given the passion with which I also do my training sessions, I think because when I was selling, I genuinely believed what I am telling you is going to be of benefit to you. And it was more a case of empowering you with knowledge, as I'm doing now, as I'm thinking about it, and it was a quest to make a sale. And I think that's a difference there. So a huge difference. What I'm sharing with you is intended to help you. I genuinely believe it's almost like I'm training, but I'm actually, yes. So it was never, and I think that's where the passion would come from, that I genuinely believe what I am telling you is going to be of benefit to you. So I cannot put a finger on any parental influence in that regard, though my mother was a teacher. But I think it had to do a lot with that. And you're not the first to mention that in terms of passion. I even get a lot of that when it comes to my training sessions, that there's a lot of passion in it. And away from me also, salespeople who do not have any passion in what that they are doing, or anybody for that matter, even in your space, you don't have any passion in what you're doing, then it shows through, it shows through, and in the case of a sale or customer engagement, it can impair that engagement.
So in your experience, because again, I might also share some of my own experiences in there, because I was very privileged. Even when I worked at Africa Online, we got incredible sales training, because again, we're also selling something that was quite new at the time, internet access and also websites at some point. But what are your thoughts around the value of nurturing and training people to actually be good at sales? What have you seen in terms of, probably the 20, 30 odd years that you've been doing this? What are sort of the things that you found to be so fundamentally important to be good at it?
Wow. Okay. I think, first of all, your approach to it will matter. I have seen, well, as you can imagine, a myriad of types of salespeople, but the ones that really stand out are the ones who genuinely have a passion in what they're doing. They genuinely have a passion for what they're
interested
doing.
in the product, they're interested in the service.
They're interested, most importantly, even in the customer. Yes, because that's a key thing. They may be interested in the product, but there are those who are not interested in the customer. That makes a huge difference. They genuinely are interested in the customer. They believe that the customer is going to be a better person. They believe the customer is going to benefit. And those that do so tend to succeed. Now, that's one thing I've seen, the passion in what it is that they're doing and the genuine passion, genuine interest in the customer. I've also seen that there are those then, of course, now with training can become better. And training a salesperson and having a salesperson continue to perform is not easy. And much as sales can tend to be, which is unfortunate in many organizations, downplayed, when you stop to think about it, no matter how big or how grandeur or how even a multinational, at the end of the day, what it's looking for is a sale. Really. When you stop to think about it, what they're looking for is a sale. Now, back to your question, what are some of the things I have seen about the salespeople? The ones that have a passion about it, the one who approach it with, and I know this may sound cliche, but it is still valid today. The attitude towards it, which passion would be an example of, makes a huge, huge difference. Because the truth is, it's not smooth sailing. Sailing is not easy. It's not smooth sailing. It has its ups and downs and sometimes downs. And the only thing that keeps you going is whether you truly believe or are passionate about what it is you're doing. Now, the question then will beg, that of course depends on what it is you're selling. That is very true. If I'm selling bread, I'm not selling life insurance. That becomes
there's differences.
It's different. The difference is, yes, in terms of the product or service that's being sold. But aside from that, in each of them, there are people who sell, and I'm using bread as basic to mean compared to more complicated things to sell. But even that doesn't mean that all the salespeople who are selling bread, and that's a metaphor for anything seen as easy to sell, it doesn't mean that they're all thriving. Even there are some there who are still struggling. There are still sometimes, just like in life insurance, which is considered the most difficult thing to sell, at the spectrum is considered life insurance, considered the most difficult thing to sell, and the bread is considered the easiest to sell. So across the spectrum, there's everything else. But even the spectrum of life insurance, there are those many who are struggling, but there are those who are not, who are thriving. Now, by the same token, those who sell bread, there are those who are thriving and those who are struggling. But key is passion in the product, passion in the customer, and genuinely have a genuine belief that you're going to engage the customer. That's more even profound in this century. In the last century, we could have gotten away with, see what happened most in the last century, the 20th century, it was very easy to get away with just passion for the product, but not the customer. Because information was one way. I know, you don't. I, the salesperson, know, you don't. And the salesperson here, again, is a metaphor to mean even a doctor, and not just your professional salesperson. So even I have the information, you don't. So whatever I tell you is gospel. The only other alternative you have is to go to another salesperson or doctor.
And hear their perspective.
So how many people do you do that to? Possibly at most seek a third opinion. That would be that's really stretching it. By and large, my opinion, the first one is the one you'll go with. So you're stuck with that. And unfortunately, very many salespeople messed up that dynamic, which is why sales has a very bad rap with customers. Now, enter the 21st century, and the ground fundamentally shifted. Fundamentally, what happened in the 21st century? Today, when you go to see a doctor, Moses, the doctor you're going to see is a second opinion. True?
You've already done your, what do you call it? My wife calls it Dr. Google.
Dr. Google is your first opinion.
Yeah.
And I remember once I'd gone to see a doctor. My son had a wound. It was taking a long time to heal. And so I go to see the doctor, and he explains to me, it was a lady actually, she explains to me what could be the problem. Then she saw something on my face, which I later on realized was doubt.
Oh.
But then what impressed me the most is, and that's the classic 21st century doctor, she asked me a question, and both of us burst out laughing. She asked me, what did your Google search show? She instantly knew the reason why I'm having doubt in my face is because what she is telling me and what I had read were inconsistent. So I was expressing doubt with what a medical doctor was saying, and I know zero about medicine. But that is the challenge of the 21st century. You cannot afford to assume the customer doesn't know. In fact, the customer knows much more than you. So what she did anyway was to walk me through what Dr. Google had told me and why it doesn't apply to this case, and then bring me to why what she was saying was more relevant. And that is an example of what 21st century means and why we cannot afford in the 21st century. Salespeople cannot afford not to be passionate about the customer. Because the customer, and as I said, I'm using the word salesperson here loosely to mean anybody who's engaging with a customer, most likely knows more than you do. There is no longer, the information is two-way. It's no longer one way. It's not a one-way street anymore. The information is two-way. As I said, in the last century, salesperson knows, customer doesn't. 21st century, customer is overwhelmed with information. In fact, they are just checking to confirm. Even parenting in the 21st century has changed. If again, what you're telling your child is rarely news. They know. And when they're engaging you, even how you engage with them differs. So passion is key. Back to your question as to what some of the things I've seen they have passion and they're very optimistic. Those are the two things I've seen. The salespeople who thrive are optimistic. They always believe it will become better.
There's a better way.
There's a better way, and there's a different way, and I'll succeed. So that optimism, and I remember there's a research that was shown that the salespeople who are optimistic are 37% likely succeed, 37% more than your other.
But I think the potential prospect who becomes a customer is actually feeding off that optimism. They buy into you because of that.
Because you believe in what you're saying. And it's good you've said that. If the prospect, customer, and use the terms interchangeably, though technically speaking they mean different things, believes in you, then there tends to be a bias that what you're telling me about the product must also be good. If they don't believe in you, it's very unlikely, unless you're a monopoly, of course, that they will buy your product. So there is that aspect, as you said, that there is, although they feed off the optimism, and they genuinely feel, therefore, that we should translate to the product. And that's key for salespeople to realize. Now, unfortunately, the truth be told, also, that's the same reason why conmen succeed, because they demonstrate such confidence and optimism. But that's non-ethical, but it proves the point that if you demonstrate optimism, if you ethically so, and you demonstrate passion what you're doing, statistically you stand at 37% chance better at making that sale, because the prospect has believed in what it is that has believed in you, and therefore what you're saying.
So there's something I want to bring up, and I think we had an earlier chat with you before coming into the studio, which was, I went through a lot of sales training professionally. I read a lot. I continue to learn about sales. But one of the things that shocked me when I went through what I call the first experience of formal sales training was the rigor or the methodology behind it. I think many people, maybe when they first go into sales, are winging it, which is what I discovered, because I had a small business many years ago, and I realized only after or during the training that clearly I just got lucky, because there's this whole process of qualifying a potential customer. There's how you dress, there's how you talk, the words you use. Like one thing that's always stuck with me, I can never put on a proposal what I'd call the word cost. I'll always use the phrase investment. Or when I'm discussing with a client how to move forward, I'll say things like, I'll not use words like contract. I will say the agreement or the paperwork. And that's from sales training. That's from reading and using the right words, and basically what you discover there, even just the choice of words, I think we were discussing earlier that some people find a beard repulsive, and that could cost you a sale. Maybe you walk into a room without body deodorant, and because maybe you smell a bit sweaty, that can cause you a sale. But sales training is all those little nuances that ultimately drive you towards the successful outcomes. And I want to maybe talk about that because I believe that's really a big part of what you do, which is you sort of equip and train and nurture sales professionals to do better jobs for the organizations where they work. I mean, what is the level of importance of that, and how impactful have you seen it when somebody has gone through that sort of training or nurturing to become a successful salesperson?
One day, there's a plumber who was referred to, very highly referred to. So he comes home, and his recommendations, there was no question about his technical capacity, at least even on phone, when I engaged him, the way he explained what the problem was and how he would solve it. But the moment he got home, he was reeking of alcohol.
Oh, God.
And it was clear and there was his armpits. And suddenly all the expertise just
disappeared. There was no confidence.
It just disappeared. and I didn't even engage him.
Are you kidding me? You literally shut it down right there.
This is not going to
Oh,
work.
God.
Now, it is easy to say that is a plumber, he's not exposed, everything. But you tend to see that even in the corporate world. Now, I've drawn that example of the plumber for two reasons. One, what I've just shared, that it happens in the corporate world. And number two, sales training is not cheap. Not very few. And we live in a country where SMEs are 90% of
the market.
The market is actually 93 last I checked. So not all organizations can afford to engage, to pay for sales training, at least not continually. And for those that cannot afford, there are basic things like appreciating, and this is key for them to understand, that selling, at the end of the day, no matter how grandiose it is, it ends up with one person talking to another. Now, the human interaction, the qualities that enhance human interaction and the qualities that frustrate human interaction do not require you to come to a classroom and learn necessarily. There are basic things like how you present yourself, how you groom. And a grooming doesn't have to be expensive. And some people tell me, but I cannot afford to buy expensive. You don't need to. You don't need millions. Maybe I'm exaggerating that. You don't need thousands to brush your teeth. You do not need to be well paid to dress comfortably. In fact, there's an article I did once about grooming for the beginner salesperson. And there are three things mentioned. One, I talked about the fact that customers don't care how you look, that you didn't eat that morning. They don't care that you have just started off and you're not being paid a salary, you're not being paid. They don't care. Now, if you have not had breakfast and you carry yourself with the supposition that they will understand that I have not eaten, so how I carry myself should not matter. That will backfire on you. Now, and it will backfire on you spectacularly, because from the word go, the way you walked in and they see you, then that, like my plumber, creates a bias. And I share in the blog and I say, wake up to ugali. Now, it is easy to laugh and say, how can I eat ugali in the morning? But, well, that is what Eliud Kipchoge eats, by the way. The marathon, the one who broke the marathon, he eats ugali in the morning. So wake up, eat ugali. It'll keep you pulsating until 3 p.m. And you've just had that in the morning. Now, that doesn't cost you. You don't need to have a king's breakfast. You can afford to do that. And please note, I'm sensitive to the fact that we're in a country where 93% of people can't afford to regularly engage a professional to. So one, for salespeople on that nature, eat ugali. Number two, you can go to what we call Mtumba here, a flea market. You can buy secondhand clothing and look very presentable. And thirdly, there are enough YouTube videos you can watch in terms of. So there is a component of of initiative, individuals who are in selling, especially if they are in the early stages, that there's a responsibility they need to take up to appreciate I'm interacting with a human being. How do I want to look like? How do I want to present myself? Now, in this 21st century, and especially in your space, we find that startups, tech startups, how they dress very casually. They're in t-shirts. They you even find staff members with what are they called? Earrings, even
And
nose rings, tattoos,
dreadies,
and they look very cool in the 21st century. You even see the CEO walks in cargo pants. But even them, and this is important. Their customer-facing staff do not dress like that. And many staff members who join that organization struggle with the fact that you should be more concerned with my content. Well, the truth is, it is not you who dictates how the marketplace is, what the marketplace wants. It's customers. Banks today are embracing dress down, and I put that in quotes because the idea of a bank's dress down is at best, a t-shirt, a branded t-shirt that has the bank logo. But even if they dress like the way you and I, there's a reason why. Because the customer's perception of safety and with their money doesn't look like a stud and a knee. So long as you're customer facing, keep in mind that this is a human being you're interacting with, and what that human being expects is what you look like. And we normally say I normally say that if you sell, your dress is not your choice. Yeah, if you sell, your dress is not your choice. There's a famous saying, "My dress, my choice." Not when you're selling. Your dress is not your choice.
You have to conform.
You have to conform to the customer.
Which is why I think for the longest time, if you went to a bank, it would always be, I think, is it a dark blue suit with a red tie or blue tie, because that is consistent with the banker persona.
And more importantly, safety with money and seriousness with the issue. So, and many bankers to date, they will not admit it, but they walk in without a tie, put on the tie during the day, then leave it in the drawer and then leave. But now, coming back to your question, sales training. Now, I mentioned that thing about you don't need, it's not expensive to be presentable at all, but it is key to be presentable. It's very, very important. And just flip the coin. It is easy. And it's quite unfortunate, Moses, that your average salesperson walks around with hanging their head, looking very, well, I don't want to use that miserable, but desperate. And it's unfortunate because then that manifests the passion we talked about lacks, and that expression carries through in terms of how the prospect sees them, and therefore the sales and everything else. It just becomes it spirals down all the way. But a gentleman who is passionate about what they're doing woke up to, by the way, the third thing, let me digress here. I mentioned in terms of, and this is for salespeople who may be watching this and they're thinking, okay, how do I look presentable? And I do not drive a car. I do not. Well, first of all, 90% of the salespeople, 98% of salespeople don't drive a car. They walk, they move about, or they public transport. But that is not an excuse for you to show up with dusty shoes, to show up sweaty. No, that's not an excuse. That now becomes a responsibility for you to figure out how, when I get to the prospect, how I need to what's the word? To freshen up. That is key, because what he's expecting to see, and if he sees what he's expecting to see, if he buys me, he'll be there for the product. If he doesn't buy me, he won't the product. So now coming back to sales training, there's formal sales training for the institutions that can afford it, but even then there are certain things that have to be continually being done. Now, unfortunately, most companies assume this etiquette thing you and I are talking about. So once you've trained them on the product knowledge, then they should be able to go and sell. No, that's like focusing on the ingredients and not the packaging. So the packaging matters. And this is where now you find a sales manager, or you find an individual who's struggling. You find the 21st century yuppie who says that, no, my content is what matters. I can show up in, what's it called? If it's a lady, or the what do they call that? We used to call it tumbokat.
Yes, I remember. There's a name for it. I don't know what it is.
Yes, and my and we get that a lot nowadays, by the way. We get a train with, and we ask, can you train our staff on communication-based communication, which includes how they dress and what they say. And coming back to the digital space, it's what they write. Because the argument normally tends to be with the 21st century customer engaging stuff is what I write on Twitter shouldn't affect what it is that my professional life is. Those are two separate things. Well, that's what you would like to believe. The truth is, the moment you've put it in a public space, it is the public that dictates the norms of how it would work. If you consider it private, keep it private to yourself, limit its circulation. But the moment in a public space, you will be judged by it. Whether it's on Twitter or Instagram or so long as you are the one who wrote it, you will be associated by it. And this is part of it's a personal brand. It's that is, and so this whole aspect of how you present yourself as a salesperson is very key, because if the prospect doesn't buy you first, then it's very unlikely that they will buy what you're selling.
Oh. What are your thoughts around the idea that I think in the condition that is being human, in one way or another, we're always selling. A parent is selling a child the idea of performing better in school. The mother is selling the baby, eat this particular vegetable because it's good for you. The startup founder is selling his business to investors to invest in the business. But therefore, I feel sometimes like there's a disconnect that as much as we've gone digital and all these things, that at the heart of it, selling is very much part of the human condition in different contexts. And my question to you would be, especially for organizations that are trying to achieve excellence through sales, what are some of the key ingredients that people need to be thinking about if they're actually going to do this well, either at an individual level, which I think you've kind of touched on, regarding passion and subject matter, interest. But what are the other things that you have seen that make organizations or, I suppose, individuals excellent at sales? Because I think it touches so many elements, doesn't it?
Well, true. There's a book by, and I think this would address what you're talking about. There's a book by a gentleman called Daniel Pink.
I've heard of him before.
It's called To Sell is Human.
Yes.
And it says, in this space, in this age we're in now, we're no longer moving products. We're moving people. It's very profound.
Moving people.
We're moving people.
With ideas.
Correct. And so moving products is a very transactional, physical thing. Moving people is a very emotional thing. So the word moving here is not this, it's just a moving product. I have this pillow and I want to sell it. So I'm moving the product. But I'm moving people. They need to be touched enough to feel why. That's very profound.
And that's an emotional thing.
And that's an emotional thing. Moving products is what people used to do in the last century. What we're doing now is moving people. So a parent, as you said, is trying to persuade a child on the benefits of eating. And the teacher is persuading the student on the benefit of attention. And the ones who are excelling in moving people are the ones who are the future of selling.
Wow.
So the future of selling for organizations are organizations which are going to move people. And moving people is not about moving products. It's about drawing them into your space because they feel like they can relate with what it is that you are doing.
It's almost selling the philosophy.
It's almost selling the philosophy. Now, I think for our viewers who may not be as probably, we may want to unpack that. What does that mean? We said selling our philosophy. Let me again back to Kenya and the fact that, let me draw an example. I shared once in the blog an experience I had with a hawker. Surprisingly.
Really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm at a petrol station and this gentleman walks towards me. And I can see he's a hawker and across his arm wipers for a vehicle.
Oh.
Yeah, so now, being the Kenyan that I am, default setting, I'm prepared to tell him no. But of course, being a Kenyan, I'll not say no. I will say tomorrow, kesho, the things we say.
Yeah.
But when he got to where I was, how he opened that sale changed everything. What he told me, typically I was expecting for him to tell me, to ask me whether unataka wiper. Do you want to buy wipers? But what he asked me was, I'll say things, I'll translate. He says, boss, hiyo wiper yako kuzidi kutumia itakuharibia gari. Direct translated meaning, if you continue using your wiper the way they are, they'll mess up your windscreen. And then he tells me, in fact, don't believe me, piga kioo, spray your windscreens, which I did. And then when the wiper appears, when the wipers came on, there was a mark. And then he tells me, right now, you're not using your wipers much because it's not raining. But when it starts to rain, the continuous use, this mark will become permanent. And in fact, this is not the only are the only this is not the only problem. Let me show you the difference. So he removes the rubber part of the wiper, then he puts his, and
This
then
is
tells
real
me,
time.
this is real time. Then he tells me test, and so I test, and guess what? There's no mark, and then he tells me the problem is not just the windscreen, even the rear screen is the same problem. In fact, spray the rear screen, and I do that, and there's a mark. He goes to the rear screen, replaces the wiper with his. I spray, there is no mark. Now keep in mind, Moses, which wipers are in place now? His.
Yes, they're already locked in. Yeah,
They're already locked in. And by the way, to cut the long story short, ultimately I ended up buying. But what he did, had he come to me with telling me, now's a wiper, selling wipers, he would have been moving a product. But what he did was to move me
to where he is.
First of all, to see the problem I have, to see that I need to address the problem, and to appreciate that the solution he's offering addresses my problem. Now, keep in mind, there's nowhere he appears there. It's all me, me, me. My problem, my pain, my decision to make, my need to address that pain, and the solution being offered. Wow. Now, when you're moving a product, it's about you. My product, my commission or my sale, my money. You buy. So organizations, and I have talked about a hawker, but now if we were to extrapolate that to an organization and its customer-facing staff, or the organization in totality, how are you moving? Are you moving your prospects? Are you moving? And moving is emotional. Moving people is emotional. Moving products is transactional. Moving people is relational. So organizations that move, and one of the ways of moving people is through content creation. For instance, what we're doing now. There is no commercial transaction happening here, but for any viewer seeing this may find benefit what they're doing, and content creation is one way. And individuals who engage with your content, you're not necessarily Moses or me, but individuals who engage with content, they find useful. It is because they have been moved. You don't subscribe to every YouTube channel. And many of those that you watch, you still don't subscribe to them, but you continue going back to them because they have moved you. So content creation is one way of moving individuals. Another way away from digital, even in the analog sense, how you engage a customer from the word go and keeping it about customer like the hawker, and having yourself as an organization investing in the customer, the prospect, investing in the customer and how the customer benefits is huge. And this is not what? What's the word? It's not, what's the word I'm looking for, Moses? It's not, it's 21st century organizations. What did they do? See, take an example of Uber.
Yes.
What Uber did, and this 21st century organizations, Uber being an example, the ones that came in the 21st century, what did they do? They appreciated the fact that in the last century, the difference between selling then and now, and selling here is not necessarily a salesperson, but an organization selling, was that, as I remember I mentioned, I have the information, you don't. The organization was in control of the narrative. They dictate which books you will buy, they dictate which TV, which whatever it is, reviews, which hotel you will stay in, on if it's TripAdvisor. So you look at the customer dictates. Now, what did the 21st century organizations do like Uber? If you stop to think about what Uber has done, what Uber does is to shift control, is to align itself to the 21st century. They brought back control to us, the customer. So gone are the days when I call the cab driver and he tells me, I am at this place, I'm in Iped, give me a few minutes, I'll be there shortly. Then he give me some random figure. Now I'm in control. I see where he's at. I see what it will cost me. I even see what his name is, what cab, everything is there. Today, and transparency, control and transparency are two things that in the 21st century build up towards moving the individual.
Yeah.
Now, let's move, come to Kenya. If you look at what, am I allowed to mention brands in Kenya?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. If you look at what Safaricom does, even with the challenge, and we stop thinking about it, this is a company that has more than half of Kenya's population is customers. And yet, in terms of when I have a breakdown in, say, fiber, home fiber.
Yeah.
There's, the first time I called, the first ring that happened, a voice came over and said, we're having trouble with and we're already working on it. So you can imagine there was downtime. I call, and there's a pre-recorded voice telling me already that we are aware this thing is happening. We're working on it. So that's
preemptive.
It's preemptive. So away from waiting for me to call, you already are proactive in how you're managing. Now that I was moved. And in the meantime, as you're waiting, here's 5 GB. Again, I'm moved. And this will take a bit longer than we expected. So there's a lot of, that continual moving the customer makes a huge difference. And it's quite common in the 21st century companies we see today. Now, away from Safaricom, even if you look at today, if I buy a book of Amazon, or I buy something of Alibaba, and I say I bought a book of Amazon, and I say that it has not gotten to where I am at, the tracker could show it's in Kenya, even Nairobi, but Amazon will not argue with me. They just simply send me another one. It could be, and more often than not, it ends up being that it just misplaces at the post office. But look at that. They, instead of just moving, they say that so you move customers, you move people, and I'm drawing that parallel because that's very, very, very. Another way of moving people could be, if you look at if I'm a hotel, and again it could be a grandiose JW Marriott, or I could be a kibanda. But I know my customers by name. One kibanda, kiosk, I'm sure your viewers can Google what kibanda is for those who are not Kenyan. And I just go there to eat.
Yeah.
And yet I can go to another kibanda and the owner calls me by name. And the days I don't show up, even sends me a text, we've not seen you today, is everything okay?
Makes a world of difference.
A world of difference. The experience is fundamentally different. So organizations that learn to move people in the 21st century and going forward are the ones that are going to thrive. The ones that are still moving products will really struggle.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of themes here. I'm hearing about branding. I think branding is part of what's we're hearing here, which of course plays into selling. I often tell people that for me, there's no compromise. If it's a laptop, it's always going to be a MacBook. If it's a phone, it's probably going to be a Samsung. If it's going to be running shoes, it's going to be Nike. I believe in those brands. You don't have to sell me the brand. Number two, I'm hearing about customer experience here. Probably as part of that customer journey, meaning that how you serve me, how you retain me. It's not just about the initial sale. It's like almost continuously selling you, keeping you on our brand. But there's another element I think that you've touched on that I think is super important, which is content marketing, the value of content in the digital age, that the modern sales practitioner or somebody who's involved in selling an idea perhaps, or even pitching a startup, has to sell that somehow. But content is sort of at the heart of it. And I think one of the things that you've done really well is you had this column. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we discussed a few weeks ago, which is the way you had this column in a publication. You were writing about the sales pitch, which was insights and perspectives around, selling and so forth, which I believe, maybe you can also talk about how that even happened. But above and beyond that, I think I'd like to hear about how you then transition from that to what you're doing now, which is a digital first approach to doing thought leadership, and how that has impacted your sales training and sales profession as well.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, that's what we were talking about when we last met. So I was writing this column, Business Daily, very successful column, 8 years running. I met several individuals across all cadre, from executive all the way to operational.
As a result of
that, and who tell me, we read you're the Kageche who writes that article. Goodness, we love your articles. They're very practical and everything else. And so
it brought you customers, right?
Oh, it did bring me customers. That's true. And then COVID happened. And I remember that time, even you used to tell me, it was, and because remember, as Moses mentioned, we used to be in we were
neighbors sharing a wall.
And he used to read me, by the way. He used to read my articles. And Moses told me, and I'll never forget, told me, you should get your own website, because. And you've been very successful. You're a content creator before even digital. You used to write in the newspaper, actually.
Yeah.
And you told me from your experience, you learned that you could be dropped off by the publication anytime. So it is good that you have your own website. But at that time, I wasn't seeing why, because I write for the premier newspaper, the Brand Association. I wasn't seeing the need, so I was pushed into digital.
Yeah, tell us how that happened.
When COVID happened. with all these challenges, then now the newspaper dropped off contributors and then suddenly dwindled up. And so suddenly my billboard
was gone.
Just like that. Now, truth of the matter is, I did have a website, but it was more for presence.
Just ticking the box.
It's just ticking the box, there's a website. But now, suddenly, I have no billboard. I have no marketing.
You don't exist.
I don't, actually, that's the word. I don't exist. Totally. I don't exist. So all the content, all the knowledge I have in my head, in fact, the knowledge I used to say is, I'm a light, I'm a candle that is covered. So I don't exist. Very well put, actually. Just like that. And now I had to learn this thing called digital. Yes, I knew it in the periphery, but I had to learn it. Now I am truly grateful for the gentleman who I met, name of Paminus, forever. He mentored me through that, and forever. He has his own, he runs corporate staffing, and he mentored me through that. And that's one thing that I will also mention as part of the importance of having a mentor. So he mentored me through that, and he walked me through the what's the word? The learning curve of digital. And so I stopped seeing the website as how do you put it, as a tick box. Now I realize it's a sales tool. A website is a sales tool, especially for those of us in service industry consultancy. Even statistically, globally, the presence of a website makes all the difference. In fact, it is still the number one in terms of sales. What's the word? Sales. What's it called? Sales.
The lead generation.
Lead generation. If that's the word.
Yeah.
Now, and it's not just the website. It's digital presence.
Yes.
Now, digital presence can be different ways. I know a career coach who pushes her content through LinkedIn, and she's done very well for herself. But the website, the beauty is it allows you to present a lot of information in one space.
Correct.
Now, I then had to revamp everything. I had to go now completely to zero. This website, first of all, I discovered that I didn't even exist on Google. It was that bad.
Wow.
Yes. It was a tick box. There's a website. Unless you fed in lendmeyours.co.ke, you would never have found me. But even when you would have found the website, you'd not have. It was all over the place. It was a tick box.
Yeah.
So I started learning what digital marketing is, and I started learning what SEO. It's called. What does it stand for?
Search engine optimization. Yeah.
And I then now discovered a course on Google. Yes, Google had a course on small businesses and search engine and digital marketing, and it was online now, and it was free at the time. It was for Google skills, digital skills for Africa.
Yes.
So I did that entire course, and see, when you're learning as an adult, and that's part of the things I do, adult learning. When learning as an adult, you're not learning to pass an exam. You're learning it because I wasn't doing it so that I can post on LinkedIn that I've done a certificate. No, I was learning it because I needed to grow the business in that manner. So I was learning what I learn, and then I implement. I learn, I implement. I have a mentor. I learn. He corrects me. I've done mistakes here, and the whole shift was monumental. You see, I referred to the article as a column, as a billboard, and that's exactly what it was. It's just a billboard. But see, Moses, if you see a billboard, you can't act on it. But
you may or may not.
By act on it, I mean you're limited to what you can do with it. But when you read an article, you can share it. When you can click, you can
send an email.
You can send an email. You can react. You can engage with it more effectively than you can a billboard. Now, because anybody who would have written to me from the column, you can imagine how taxing that was. It means they have finished the column, they look at the email address, they type in the email address, and then send that. You must have been really moved to get to do that.
There's so much friction.
So much friction. In fact, that's the word. There's so much friction. But when it's online, it's a whole different ballgame. There's zero friction. It's click, 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 send.
And you're there, yeah.
And you're done. Then there's shelf life. Thursday's newspaper, once it's done, it's done. And unless somebody's looking for, and that around about that time, I remember even the traditional media was only beginning to get online. So once it's done, it's done. But if today I even get leads, we even get leads from articles from several years back, and if it can even contribute to that. So the transition for me was painful, but pleasurable at the same time. Painful because the whole change from I don't exist to now I have to create. Now it helped, of course, that time that a lot of people are going online.
So this COVID
now
time,
there's this COVID time. So it took almost a year before now, because it takes time. That's the thing about digital. Before you create enough traction, you really have to invest. Now it helped, in my case, that I had a backlog. At that time, I think there were like, 300 articles?
Wow,
Right
for those
now,
8 years.
For those 8 years, I'd written over that period of
and
time.
Presumably this is almost evergreen content, right?
Yes. So, and whatever may have, by and large, yes. So that helped, because then by the time the website, the content is, the SEO is being done, such optimization, there was so much content. Now, of course, it had to be redone to be skewed towards SEO. So I remember the first time I sat on that website to start working on SEO, to make it, Moses, I sat a whole Friday, a whole Saturday, a whole Sunday. I was exhausted. Sunday, 11 p.m. And when I'm talking about Friday, 1 a.m. from work, there's nothing else I am doing, because you would know what it means to revamp that whole content and the structure of the entire website to make it SEO friendly. 3 days of revamping that entire content. But it was necessary because, as you said, I didn't exist. So 3 full days created the foundation around which that happened. And then now working, of course, with the technical individuals in that space, creating that content and now growing in that
publishing
space.
as well.
Publishing as well. So we've never stopped publishing. Every week there's an article that still comes out. But in retrospect, COVID was a blessing. That contract being cancelled was a blessing, because the benefits of digital, you cannot compare at all with the newspaper column. At all, you were in control of what you write, but more importantly, reach and longevity. It's infinite.
Yeah.
And what's the word, to mean that you can connect it to so many things. You can connect it to LinkedIn. You can connect it to, there's the interconnectivity is huge. So, for instance, this podcast we're doing now, if I still run the column, they'd be like silos.
Yeah.
So there's no synergy at all.
There's no interconnectivity.
There's no interconnectivity. So my journey to digital, I was pushed into it, courtesy of COVID.
Screaming and shouting.
And yes, and the fact that I did exist mattered. And the fact that, of course, now because of the economy, everything going down, the only thing I had in terms of the business and everything else, courtesy of COVID, the only thing I had on my hands was time. And that really helped, because SEO is not easy. And when you're starting, especially if you're coming from a space like I was, of course, once you understand it, it's a joy to work
easy,
with. You even enjoy doing it.
And you're getting found and all that.
Precisely. And then, and of course, because it's, and people normally tell me, but if you do it once, no, it's called search engine optimization, not search engine perfection. So you'll never arrive, which is why being the space where that happens, that is easy. There are enough webinars you can attend. And for those who are watching this and they're wondering how to do it for themselves, I would highly recommend Yoast. Yoast, like Toast, but beginning with Y.
Yeah.
They have monthly websites or monthly webinars and a whole academy on SEO and engaging with that. But then but then digital has its own challenges. For instance, right now, one of the challenges SEO is having is AI.
Exactly. In fact, I wanted to get into AI because as much as you become a convert, I remember when we met last time, you were telling me a little bit about how you're using AI to repurpose your content.
Correct.
And to podcast. Maybe just talk a little bit about that as well.
So let me, okay, first of all, AI, how has it affected search engine optimization? And in very lay language, search engine optimization is the continual quest to be found online and ideally be on page 1 of any Google search, if not top 5.
Yeah.
Now, AI has come in to disrupt that, because now most likely when you search, the first in the search result you get is AI generated.
The summaries,
The summary is already there, and chances are that you will scroll down are very limited. But that's that. In terms of selling, And by selling here, I mean not just professional one person selling to another, but in terms of engaging customers, it presents a huge opportunity in terms of repurposing content. So AI, one of the ways of using it is converting text to speech. Now, typically that would require a huge investment of a studio and everything else. But with AI, we use AI, for instance, to convert our text to speech.
Yes.
And there are enough tools for that to happen. And it has made it very, very, one, it's easier and very affordable, because then you're not having to invest a lot in what it is that you are doing. So you've repurposed content, yes, you're right, in terms of AI, to engage a customer that is, and a listening audience away from just a reading audience. And that has been one of the ways AI has benefited. And even for organizations that are looking for, AI is not the future of the successful salesperson, if I use the word salesperson or business owner that is selling, is not knowing AI, is you learning how to use AI. And even at a very basic level, for instance, ChatGPT, most people still use it as Google. They still
searching.
They still search, yes. So and it's not for search, it's for revealing. So the AI, yes, to come back to us, yes, we use AI in terms of converting the continually growing content from in terms of our weblog, in terms of text to speech, in terms of a podcast. And so yes, there's
and you're doing that right now practically.
Yes, we're practically doing that.
So you're converting your old content
into audio
content, putting it on your podcast.
Absolutely, and video content.
And what's the performance been like? I mean, the fact that it now lives as written narrative, now it has audio. Is there an entirely new audience that you're reaching in that space, and actually you're seeing results from that?
That's very true, and that's the beauty about digital. You're able to see analytics. You're able to get data away from a newspaper, which you're just hoping that somebody will read. But now you can see where it is, where's the traffic coming from, which countries are reading this, how often are they staying on any video at any one time, where are they focusing on, how, etc. So, however, again, with everything else new, it still has to take time to grow. So it's a learning curve. So it's just something we started off it's about a year now, but it's growing slowly in terms of And again, sorry for interrupting it, in terms of it's also very useful for customer engagement.
Fantastic. So I'm really loving all this, because you've told us a little bit about your background, the sales profession, training, key ingredients, your transition from traditional media to digital media, content as a sales tool or foundation, as it were. But now I'd like to talk a little bit about maybe two last things. Number one, what do you see going forward for the sales professional in any industry or space, as far as the implications of technology and AI are concerned? And then my second and last, or rather my last question to you would be, if people wanted to find you or to engage you, where can they find you online?
The future of selling it's interesting. You should ask that. It was assumed that when the internet came, the salesperson's job would die, because why do you need the salesperson? It was online, you can transact. But if anything, the profession has actually continued. In fact, they have more people, because what is happening is that the definition of selling is beginning to sink in, as you had mentioned.
Yes.
It is a teacher convincing a student, exchange information for attention. It is a parent, it is the business owner, it is the nurse convincing you why you should take this jab, because it is a benefit for you, and the pain that. But even away from that, even the professional salesperson, because whereas e-commerce has enabled the selling to what's the word? To become easier through transactions.
Of course, yes.
Ultimately, the sale still requires one person to another. So organizations will adopt AI. And in fact, before AI, their organizations used to discover digital, such the websites as search engine optimization, and the lead generation from the website becomes successful, they let go of their physical sales force. That has happened. And I know one of the groceries in town that happened. They discovered digital lead generation from digital was so much more than what they were getting from their physical human salespeople. That they let go of them. But that doesn't spell doom for the salesperson. It just means the salesperson has to evolve himself in terms of how they're using modern day tools to, and by salesperson, yeah, even by business owner, in terms of how to get, for instance, if I am selling land, and to this day, because of the fraud involved and because of the deception, successful people who sell land or even house are the ones who physically go to the diaspora and engage with
As a trust factor.
as a trust factor. So where trust factor, very well put, is involved, the physical individual that will still remain. AI is still in its nascent stages, still very new, still in infancy stages. We are still learning what is happening with it and how it's going to unfold. But will it replace one-on-one engagement and then customers just buy? For commodities, possibly. But for more nuanced products and services, highly unlikely.
You still want to talk to that person.
You still want to talk to that person and get the touch and feel. And it's happening already, because in the hospitality industry, it was assumed that, and it's still being assumed, that robots are going to take place. Right now, there's a whole discussion on the hospitality industry globally as to what exactly is our business. What exactly is hospitality? Is it serving the customer a drink? Is it spreading the customer's bed? Or is it engaging with? So there's a whole discussion globally in the hospitality industry discussing that issue. Let us be careful about how we embracing digital. Yes, it is going to cut down our costs, but it might kill our industry in the process. Because why would I want to leave home to go be served by a robot? So anyway, it's a discussion that's ongoing. I just to do that as an example.
And it's interesting because, like I've been saying this for a few years, but I keep saying that old school is now new school again, meaning, as you see, for instance, in Christmas time, somebody will send you an e-card or something, but there's nothing quite as gratifying as getting a handwritten Christmas card delivered to you in person, possibly with a hamper or something small, and a client saying, thank you for doing business with us, or whatever it is. I tend to think that high touch element of sales, especially when there's a premium type of relationship in place, is even going to become more valuable going forward, because it's becoming so much less now that the few people who still have those old practices are potentially going to win because of them. That's what I'm tending to think. Because going back to what you're saying earlier about the emotional connection, pulling people to you, that high touch interaction, I think, might actually come back.
It might actually come back.
Yeah.
It's easy to envisage a world where, and it's easy, and especially right now with the generation that's growing up digital, the assumption is that I can get everything digitally. But what we're finding is, even in more advanced economies, that is not working. We human beings are, by nature, we are wired for interaction. So what do I foresee happening? Yes, as e-commerce has already shown us, commodities may have that. But even the e-commerce companies, they still have, you can still have somebody you can reach out to and
have a conversation and clarify. I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, I remember even during COVID, I would still want to go to the supermarket and touch and feel and grab that orange and see that special offer at the checkout counter. And I love that experience versus a purely digital experience.
And right there's a word that's the reason why we're talking about experience. It's not just a purchase, it's an experience. And that, recreating that in a detached manner is very difficult.
Wow.
For as long as the customer is looking for an experience and not a transaction, if they're not moved, then digital has its place. Yes, absolutely has its own conveniences.
It fills a gap somewhere.
But still, that ultimate human. I mean, work from home was so exciting when COVID happened. And everybody has been saying, I wish I could work from home, come to the offices. But and I know you have enough examples of individuals who, when they got back to the office, they were hugging each other because suddenly human connection
is powerful.
Is very powerful. So that's what AI is still in infancy stages. Individuals who learn and organizations learn how to use AI tools are much more prepared for the future.
Yeah.
You don't need to learn how to do coding. You don't have to understand how Microsoft Word works. What you need to know is how to use it. Equally, individuals will learn how to use AI tools, and this is. And it's when we use it as a very big term, but take ChatGPT, for instance. If I struggle to write an email because I struggle with the grammar, that's not an excuse anymore. It solves that. So it is that change in mindset that, hey, this use of AI is not as complicated as I thought. It is small things like that. I need to make this document look more professional. I don't need to struggle saying that, I don't have it. No, just feed it into an AI tool. It will do that for you. So at that very basic level, that capacity to change that mindset and use AI tools is what's going to make the difference, even for the salesperson of the future,
the day,
which
correct.
means even writing proposals and everything else, and how they communicate on email and presenting. That makes a difference. So that's an extra effort, especially it doesn't come to natural. Writing comes to me naturally, but for many people it doesn't. But that's no excuse in the 21st century, especially now with AI tools, to say that I can't do that. No, that shit I failed.
Yeah.
So that's what I see. Individuals able to do that. And will there be a time where human interaction is not necessarily in terms of selling? That's difficult, because when I look at an organization, I talk about hospitality industry, where human interaction is everything. They are questioning, wait a minute, this whole thing of using robots, what exactly is our business?
And is it potentially disintermediating us?
Absolutely. Is it potentially disintermediating with the possibility of completely killing the whole experience? Because stop and think about it. Assuming, for the sake of hypothetically speaking, assuming that robots take over the hospitality industry. So TripAdvisor, what exactly do people write on? Because TripAdvisor is about experience.
Yeah.
So what kind of reviews would people? It now becomes.
They'll basically be saying that it was a soulless experience. I couldn't feel the connection.
Absolutely.
Yes, it was all there, but it wasn't me.
It wasn't. Yeah.
And then sometimes I remember staying once at a hotel in Mombasa with my family, and they're very low tech. They don't have key cards and all this, but they will designate you a table. They'll greet you by name. They'll take the kids away so that you and your wife can have a private time while they're playing in this, and you realize that for them, they've understood that concept of the human touch is what creates that experience. And see where it goes. It looks like a lot of time, John. I want to wrap this up now.
Your second question as to where they can do.
Yeah, how can people find you?
Lendmeyorears.co.ke. Lendmeyorears.co.ke. In fact, just Google "lend me your ears." We will pop up first.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, lend me your ears.
And that's where there's all the information, and all the stuff
about me and everything else.
John, thank you so much. And really appreciate it. I feel like we have a part 2 coming of this.
I'd be happy to.
We're not done here, and I'm just so grateful you took some time to be our guest and share your profound insights on all things sales. And again, wishing you all the best. And I'm so delighted that digital is now at the core of what it is that you do.
It is.
Fantastic.
It is.
Great.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. So there you've heard it from John Kageche. I think some profound insights for anybody who wants to understand sales, particularly in the context of places like Kenya and Africa, and how digital has become central to what he does. But more importantly, I think some valuable nuggets there around how you can leverage digital platforms in conjunction with sales to improve your practitionership, but also just in terms of organizations and what they can do to get the best out of this. Ultimately, I think what we're saying is that the sales profession is very much alive, but amplified and enabled through things like digital technologies. Thank you so much for joining us again, and we'll catch you in the next one.